It's Christmas!
Roll the intro. Hello, and welcome to WINOL Games.
On today's show, one game to rule them all, we find out with Lord of the Rings, War in the North.
We get nostalgic with Rayman Origins.
And will WWE 12 pile drive the Xmas competition.
So, are you a fantasy fan?
Like a bit of role playing, yeah.
Then I reckon the newest Lord of the Rings game is just your thing.
The Ring-Bearer's quest continues toward Mordor. But to the north, a great army is gathering. If it is allowed to strike, it will bring the wrath of Sauron upon all of Middle-earth.
War in the North is a new adventure set in Tolkien's Middle-earth.
Set alongside the original quest, you forge a new fellowship.
Your job, for all intents and purposes, is to be a distraction for Frodo and the gang.
There are plenty of familiar faces, from Aragorn to Gandalf.
As well as a few characters you may not remember. Elrond's twin sons, Gimli's father Glóin, and Gwaihir, Lord of the Eagles.
I have to admit, I was fairly sceptical about War in the North. Film to game transitions as a rule are not that great, and spin-offs of these even less so.
But after a shaky start that leaves us without much of an idea of what the hell's going on, slightly overwhelmed by the interface and with a sneaking suspicion that the game's trying to be Skyrim.
You walk out of the door as one of either a man, a dwarf or an elf, and basically carve a path of gore from Breach of Carndum.
Okay, so there's a little more to it than that. Your overall goal is to find and kill Agandawa, the right hand of Sauron, through a fairly convoluted route that involves you befriending eagles, killing frost giants, and kicking up your heels in Rivendell whenever you fancy it.
When boiled down to the essentials, the game is just a hack and slasher, and a fairly mediocre one at that. It's not to say it isn't very fun in a repetitive kind of way.
It's certainly an improvement on the actual Lord of the Rings games. Return of the King, for example, especially in terms of the co-op mode, split-screen campaign that has you competing with each other for experience points and the best kills, and trading weapons to improve each other's abilities.
The game has a surprisingly long playtime, the main quest being about 8 or so hours, at least for us veterans, and has great replay value with high difficulty settings and a chance to perfect your character even further, as well as dotting challenge missions across the map as a way to hone your skills.
If I'm going to try and pick holes in it, I'd say that there is far too much talking, especially considering that most people will know a lot of the main lore anyway. Some conversations, if not skipped, can take up to 10 minutes.
Honestly, it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the game, being all about the gratuitous violence.
Some of the fighting's also a little strange. One boss in the middle of the game was incredibly tedious and took a long time to beat, even though it took no skill. And the final boss really wasn't much of a challenge.
Though it has to be said that by the end of the game, with all the upgrades you earn, your attacks start to do rather a silly amount of damage.
If you love a hack and slasher, the game is perfect for you. If not, pretty terrible.
Rayman Origins, presumably titled because of its return to the 2D model that made it popular after a disastrous sojourn into 3D, is, quite frankly, nothing new. It capitalises on the mechanics that have always held it in good stead.
To put this into some perspective, the last Rayman game that we played was on the original PlayStation, and aside from some cosmetic differences, it plays exactly the same, even down to the riding a mosquito like an airplane level.
Buzz buzz. Beyond all this is the sheer mind-numbingness of the game, with its inane music and ludicrously colourful levels. It's like running around in a rainbow.
To be fair, you do that from time to time.
It is looking more and more like Mario, isn't it?
Like any game nowadays that wants to have a real shelf life, Origins has a co-op mode that allows you and your friends to play as one of the many unlockable and playable characters.
All of which function pretty much exactly the same as Rayman. Cooperative is a lot like the new Super Mario Bros. You can help out your mates as you go, or you can steal their items, cause them to die, and generally be a bad friend.
It's been a bad week for our relationship.
In all honesty, Rayman is a very fun game to play, and is a classic, story of which is just as undecipherable as it has ever been.
So from Rayman to Rey Mysterio.
We have some wrestling action for you this week with the yearly update to the WWE series.
This is WWE 12.
That's inventive.
Every champion reinvents himself. Every champion never stops pushing.
The game's fairly simple to pick up if you've played a wrestling game before, but from the onset, we struggled to get to grips with the control system.
In previous games, you seem to be able to counter almost any move if you timed it right, a good skill to learn.
Now though, it's almost like the game doesn't want you to enjoy it, letting you get beaten up, forcing you to preempt every move, rendering the counter option pointless.
One of the few things we really liked about the game was the improved graphics, rendering every wrestler in horrifying detail.
If you've got a favourite wrestler, he, or she, is there in pretty impressive HD.
Playing with your friends was always one of the main draws for wrestling games.
But this seems to have taken some of the fun out of it.
We've played quite a few games ourselves, and I don't think I've ever shouted so much.
And let me tell you, our friendship is never going to be the same.
Graham?
I don't want to talk about it.
Well, on that note, that's all from WINOL Games.
See you online.